Welcome you guys to another Tanya Time Book Club. I love to see all the book besties in here. I like those of you who have your cameras on and those of you at home indisposed. Either way, I'm just glad you guys are all here. It's so good to see so many OGs in the house. Really excited for tonight's conversation. We've got Cebo in the house calling all the way from London, I believe.
That's right. That's right. It is very dark and very cold here right now, but I'm
Oh,
here. But I'm
I'm
here.
sad about that, but I'm so glad for you to be here. I'll go
Yeah,
through a little bit
thank
of
you.
housekeeping. Yes. I'm Tanya. I'm your host. My co-host over here, Janelle Inglis, and of course, the guest of honor, Cebo Campbell. So for our author Zoom parties, you guys, this is full spoilers. So if you just randomly passed upon Cebo's page or my page and you were looking to talk about this book because you bought it yesterday, we are going to tell you everything, every little piece of the tea. We have been talking about this book week by week. So the book besties want to really dive into it. They've come with questions, and this is also your time. So it's not just about myself or Janelle or Cebo talking. We want to hear all your questions, the stuff that had you like throwing the book across the room or looking left, looking right, looking for somebody to talk about it. This is why we are here. And this book, more than a lot of books we have done, I feel like really was incredibly thought-provoking. It stirred up a lot of emotion in a lot of us. We read this book through, Cebo, you're in London, but I feel the whole world is aware of what's sort of happening in this country. We went through elections with Kamala, and it was a lot for a lot of us. We had people, we just did this. We talked about this last week at Soho House, where we had white people, we had Black people. So we're going in tonight and I welcome all your questions. How it really works is Janelle and I will kick it off. We'll start the conversation. And it's really, we want it to be very immersive. So if you got a comment on a comment, raise your hand. We're all pretty adult at not talking over each other. So we've never really had that problem. But I think we can really get started. Any questions, any comments? We read the chat, we read the questions. So if you don't actually want to ask your questions, we're on that too. And we just get going. Cebo will be here for about an hour, and then we'll stay on after if we have more things to talk about when Cebo leaves. We call it the after party. So we can talk about what else you're reading, what you're watching on TV, what you're cooking. Tell me all the things. Yeah. All
I
right.
just want to say that I would love to be a part of the after party. That sounds like a good bit of fun.
The after
I,
party
I
is
do I do I do need to sleep, but it does sound like a vibe. And also I'll add to what you said, Tanya. Feel free to ask any questions you want. So don't feel like you have to. I mean, obviously, ask any question you want about the book. Ask any questions you want about like writing. It's a
Mhm.
process. And publishing. You got two new publishers here on the call, so ask away. But don't feel like you need to sort of silo it exclusively to the book. I'm here to talk about all of it.
Well, we're
Sounds
going to dive right in.
good.
Cebo, you wrote a book where on the first page, and if there were more time, you can look on my page or Sibo's page for him reading. You're a great reader as well, if that is the word. So it's really nice
Thank
to
you.
hear those words in your voice, but we want to dive right in. You wrote a book where on the first page, the white people in America walked into the water and killed themselves. They were all gone. And it starts with 1 year after what the US looks like for Black people. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book, um, how it felt. I know for me, I was very scared to sort of touch this book at first,
Yeah.
but it empowered a lot of us. So tell us a little bit about where this book came from.
Well, there's so many levels to its point of origin. The one I talk about most often is the story around Ferris Bueller and watching that movie and wishing that I could trade out Ferris Bueller for Trayvon Martin, and that sort of illuminated that like there are rules in this world that the characters I want to see they don't really apply. Like you can't just put Trayvon Martin in a Porsche driving across the street and it'd be okay. We root for it. It just doesn't quite work. And so I was actually, I say this often, and I mean it. I was trying to write a romance novel. Like I wanted to write something that was like joyful and fun and exuberant. And when I was trying to write the characters, I couldn't imagine them the way I wanted to. I couldn't imagine them in with the spectrum of living that I wanted. And so when I started to be a bit more analytical about why I couldn't do it, and my own personal traumas were related to that. It was like, well, Toni Morrison says we live within the white gaze, and she tries to write outside of it. And it was clear to me that I needed to remove it entirely in order to sort of create a new canvas upon which we can paint different pictures. And what was super interesting, and it has been more and more interesting as I've been on this tour. I've been home for like I think 3 days, but I've been on tour for almost 3 months, and the conversations I've had have been astonishing. But what was clear to me is how we are collectively, and I say we, I mean the Black community, Black American community in particular, how aware or unaware we are of these spaces that we don't occupy. And when I started to write the book and had some of the initial thoughts about what would this world look like, I would walk down the streets of Brooklyn. I'm walking down Flatbush, and I'm like, if I walk into this coffee shop, there's no Black people in there. There's no, and then I would go, well, that not only is there no Black people, but who's sourcing the beans here, right? Like, where does that come from? Who's got the bank account and access to the money that's flowing in and out of this coffee shop? I think we don't. The wider the lens went on any industry, the wider it got, the less people of color in general. And it was pretty interesting to think of it like less people of color and then less Black people and then less Black women, and they were always at the end of that. And I was like, whoa, what is going on? And so that made it to where, one, it became somewhat of an easy book to write because all I had to do was walk around and just be thoughtful about everything I interacted with. If I walked into a library, if I walked to a bookstore, walk to a movie theater, if I walk into a museum, if I travel to a state park, I'll just look around and I'll go, this would be very different. And it was a question of whether or not we should be engaged more as a community, or if we've had an opportunity to imagine ourselves fully engaged. And so that was easy, but it was
I
hard to
have a
talk
question
about.
for you on that because, and this kind of takes us, it's so nice now that we've all read the book. You sort of gave us this idea of like, this should be utopia. And our group, we loved, remember Ethel? We called her sort of the Oracle.
Mm.
When he drove up there, he drove through all that burned land, and this woman was just sitting there waiting to welcome him and heal him. And she sort of said, hey, now that all that, excuse my French, bullshit's gone, right? All of it. What are you going to do? Like, how are you? The barriers are gone. I don't know if we can directly correlate, but like the barriers are gone so that you could be your best self, right? And you had this world where we saw pieces of it that were like that, this community with Zaya and Vivian, but you also left us like little nuggets of like crazy Orange Beach, where people were still not willing. I mean, Orange Beach was really interesting. So talk a little bit about
Wow.
Yeah.
And Cebo, building on that too, Tanya is name dropping all these phenomenal women. You mentioned Black women as well. Like one of the personal questions I have for you, especially as you wrote about a father-daughter relationship, is are you a father? Like, talk to us about how you centered Black women throughout as well.
Well, I'm not. I'm a father of three girls. One that's a 16-year-old and a handful, and then two twin baby girls who are 2 years old, and they're a completely different handful. And I am the son. My mom has seven sisters, I think, seven or eight sisters, and then and she has just 13 people in her family, so it's 7 or 8 women. And then I had 4 sisters myself, and so I've been surrounded by women my entire life. Moreover, I've been led by women my entire life, so it isn't just that they're in, like I'm following their lead. I'm learning through their teachings in all phases of my life. It's always been that way, and so that was built into the book to some degree. To a great degree, I think, and I also think that's probably the proudest thing about this book, that that's the thing that makes me the most prideful, is that I was able to incorporate the women in it as much as possible. I wish I could have done more of it, because I really do think that if our society was transformed, it would be matriarchal, it wouldn't be a patriarchy at all.
You don't have to tell us.
And I know. We're here for it.
Right. And that was some of when I was studying other civilizations, just other nations, particularly those on the continent of Africa, most of them were matriarchal. So it made sense to me. But to your question, Tanya, it's so funny to me when I sort of think about this book relative to the psyche of Black people before I wrote it and after I wrote it, and before the election and after the election. That we live on hope. We live on the belief that we can achieve anything because we can. We've proven it time and time again through all sorts of adversity that we put before us. But it wasn't a question of whether or not we could achieve it. It was a question of whether of how many things are standing in the way of that achievement. It's like driving down the street and having roadblocks, and you just have to keep going around them and trying to climb over hills, opposed to just having a flat runway to go wherever you want. And so it felt that way more or less with the book, but the hope as a centerpiece for the propulsion of one's aspirations. Like you can still go achieve whatever you want. And if you can keep pushing and keep fighting, you will. Your endurance will always win out. I think it was Martin Luther King who had that speech about our endurance will defeat you, or something along those lines. And so there's a degree to which I believe that. But then there's also the Malcolm X in me that's like, yeah, but like, let's move it out of the way right now because we got to get to it. We don't have time for all of your standing in my way. I had a conversation yesterday. I think it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before, and someone asked me, they go, well, what would you want us to tell white people after they've read this book? I thought it was such an interesting question because I hadn't really thought about it. Like I hadn't thought about white people in general after I've written it, except to invite them into the conversation, right? But when he asked me that, I thought I would tell them what I tell them in my day-to-day life when people ask me that type of stuff. And I say, when they come to me and they go, Cebo, what can we do? George Floyd was killed in the streets. What can we do? I go, move out of the way. That's all you can do is move out of the way. Because every other thing that you're doing, even the desire to have me give you information is a distraction, just like Toni Morrison says. So just move out of the way. And that inevitably became sort of what the book was about. And I think what our pursuit of our aspirations is about. It's like, just get out of the way. Move.
I have a question on that, because there's a piece here where there's them versus us, they versus them, that sort of, and this identity piece that goes through. And I think this also ties into, if you could talk a little bit about the title, Sky Full of Elephants. In your words, like if you were to like give a quick soundbite of why the white people died, what killed them, how did that work? Like we all get it. We understand it, but like, if you had to tell white people, why did they die in this book?
Tanya, literally no one's asked me that question. I know it's crazy to think, but not a single
we all
person
think we know, but I'm just curious how you say it. I feel, I'm going to say what I said, but I see the chat coming in. Yeah.
I'm sort of in my mind, I was going, if they had to face everything that we've been through in this country all at once, what would they do? And I thought, oh, they would definitely kill themselves because like they couldn't endure that. Like they couldn't endure a percentage of that, let alone all of it. And I'm in the middle of writing a new book now, and it's about, I think I told you this, I've given the Tanya Time Book Club and Elizabeth Minnie the exclusive on these things, but it's about possession and sort of demonic possession, but possession in general, the idea that you can steal a person, right? And as I'm writing this book, I just keep thinking about the notion that that all of that pain that we've been through as not just in Americans, but the Africans that were brought to South America, the Africans that was brought to the islands, how they've been treated. When you picture what hell on earth looks like, it can't possibly be worse than that. It can't possibly be worse than some of the things that these people have been through, our ancestors have been through. And to come on the other side of that and still be treated as if you are either a second-class citizen or undeserving of being put on a pedestal, when the Bible literally says that the meek will inherit the earth. And you go, wait a minute, I don't understand how that we're still standing in the face of these horrors and in the face of this treatment when all these same people are calling themselves Christian and all these same people know what we've been through. And so that was a part of it, is because people ask me, is it all white people? Is it Italians? Is it, Irish? And I'm like, it's anyone who thinks of themselves as white in the context of not wanting to be Black, because that is definitive. If 99% of the country right now that aren't black, when you ask them that question, I think it was a old a TV show gosh, it was one of those like terrible Western shows where this kid goes, "Would you rather be live 100 years as a black man or 50 years as a white man or something like that?" And the guy was like, "Obviously, 50 years as a white man." You go, "I know, and you know it too," and so that's why y'all are dead. That's why y'all have
Aaron,
to
you have
walk.
a question.
I really like that. It's any question. Oh, we see a
Yeah,
hand,
Aaron's got one.
Aaron.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, girl.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Cebo. Look, as if I didn't just see you on
Hey,
Sunday in my
Aaron,
book
I
club meeting.
know, I know.
Listen,
Right.
our goal is to make our authors rock stars. Literally, it's
Yes.
like we don't miss a Beyonce concert or Taylor Swift, whatever your jam is. But that's how we feel about our authors. We want to see
Yes.
everywhere.
So this is my question for you. And it's a conversation between Sailor and Charlie happening between pages 108 and 109. As you can see, I'm coming here. Flags, pages
Listen,
open.
bring the specificity. Let's go.
We love
Listen,
it.
look, if everyone has, look, you know how they do in the church. If you have your book, turn to page
Yes.
108, read along.
We are with you. We are with you,
Right.
Aaron.
Charlie asked Sailor about what is in Mississippi, and Sailor's response was history. And then he goes into the conversation about the Devil's Punch Bowl and the Natchez. And then he was surprised that Charlie didn't know who Medgar Evers was. And on Sunday, you said being Black is not a monolith. So why was it important for you to highlight that as bright as Charlie was, he was unaware of that part of Black history?
It's to me, it is that whole scene is almost one-to-one with a conversation I had with someone who lived in Brooklyn 2 blocks away from Medgar Evers College and didn't know who Medgar Evers was. And you go, wait a minute, how do you not know that? Those same people are making decisions about us, making statements about us, and you don't have the total picture. How could you possibly make a statement that is a statement applied to Black people in general when you don't know those things? You have no idea. And that's true across so many things. When I talk about Nat Turner, I talk about the Stonewall Rebellion, I talk about Haiti, I talk about any of these things. So often there's a shock that people didn't know that existed. And I find those are, when we talk about the history of America and we have these sort of heralded figures to sort of contextualize American exceptionalism, and you have all of the founding fathers and all these white men with their little wigs on, you go, there were a whole bunch of other people that transformed this continent entirely, and they didn't look like that at all, and they're not heralded as heroes. I wrote down, it was almost got into the book, but it ended up not making it. And there was a line that said something along the lines of, if you are a hero, or if you are a person of influence in heroism in life, so you shall be in death, and your name can be called upon, right? Your name can be called upon. And you think of it, you go, if I'm sitting here and I feel bad, I can say in the name of Jesus, and it does something to me chemically. It makes me feel a little better. It puff my chest up. But I can't go, I'm claiming Toussaint right now as a way to get myself energized and excited. I can't call on the many women who transformed this country. And I'm saying, at least in that conversation, it's important for Charlie to know the history of the country and the people who endured it and achieved great heights as a result of it and against it, in opposition of it, because it will empower him later. It'll give him the tools and an understanding of self that I think will make him feel confident to be the person that he is. He stands on the shoulders of all those people. And so I definitely wanted that. And I wanted the book to be a window for people to access some of that information. So I didn't go deep. I just say the name, right? And I go, you don't know who Medgar Evers is. You could probably have asked how many people on this call? It's like 20 something people on this call, 30 people on this call.
50.
You could probably 50. Oh, geez.
Yeah, we grow it.
Now I'm nervous.
No, but that's the perfect Easter egg, Cebo. That's the perfect, I think, Easter egg. And planting the name alone is enough to bring so many readers on this avenue of doing research and really owning our histories and our narratives. And I hope you continue with that theme. A question came through in the chat, and you literally mentioned Haiti as well. Denise is saying, Cebo, I love Haiti, and I would like to know why you had a lot of references to Haiti throughout the book.
Well, I visited Haiti many years ago for the first time. I went to Cap Haitian, and I started to do a boat tour to Haiti. A group of friends of mine would do a sailing tour. We would sail, and you would put up tents. It was like a no waste vacation. You put your tents up, you stay, you meet the locals, and you leave.
Mm.
And I was the only black person on that trip. There's one Asian guy, but
Really?
yeah, I was the only black person. And I arrived there, and my sentiments were very different than theirs. So everyone that came with me, they were very interested in like the beach, and they were interested in the locals, almost in the same way you're interested in you go to a zoo. Like it's a performative and I almost like entertainment sort of scene, opposed to one that feels like I'm coming home. And that's what I felt like. And so I didn't come to that beach and go, this is beautiful. Why aren't there condos here? I went to this beach and I thought, how many people came off this beach and drowned in this water? Like, how many people were dragged off this beach and pulled to the US? How many people leave this beach and go into the mainland to go to the other side of the island just to be able to pay their rent, or even to feed their family? I wasn't enjoying it in the way that they were. And then as I went into the mainland and I sort of interacted with people and had the conversations, it wasn't lost on me that everyone there spoke French. And French was the nation that colonized them so long ago. It was a nation against whom they won their liberation, and yet they still speak the language. It codifies their reality even now. And that is what colonization is. It's not they arrive, they take everything, and then they leave you and you go back to a sense of self. You don't. You have to overcome all of the trauma that comes with it. And they hadn't yet. And so that sort of triggered a study for me. And then when I learned the story of Toussaint, and I learned the story of obviously we all hear it in school. You hear about the Louisiana Purchase, but it's hard to contextualize it, or at least they don't contextualize it to Haiti. They just say there's a Louisiana Purchase, and then we were able to go west. That would not have happened if Haitians did not defeat the French. The French owned everything from Louisiana all the way up to Canada. They owned all of it. So everything that you think of as the Midwest, everything that is west of that was owned by the French. And when the Haitians defeated the French, and they defeated them multiple times, so much so that the French was like, we're not doing this. You guys can have it. We'll sell it to you. There would be no America if it wasn't for Toussaint and those people. There would be no California. There would be no Midwest. There would be none of it. And yet it's those same people who are sitting here saying that the Haitians eat dogs. Like, what are you talking about? You should be celebrating them. They should be at the top of your list of American heroes. If Toussaint doesn't have a statue in every city, I don't know what we're doing. And so that, to me, it was important. If I was ever there are two places in the world that I know that my books likely will always give a nod to. And one is Haiti and one is the Congo, just because and ideally, I'm gonna give a shout out to Ghana and likely Addis Ababa, right? Because I just find that there's history in those places. They somehow doesn't make it to America, and it's an important thing to be here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The chat's popping off. Tanner, are you following it?
I'm gonna ask. I love this question. But I want to chime in. Morgan asked about lavender and the association with lavender and Elizabeth and that family. But I think I also want you to answer that question, and then we need to talk about the women in this book. Sydney, took me a long time to embrace Sydney, and I feel so differently for her now. So I think a shout out to you, because we did not I will speak for myself, but
we did not. You can speak for us, Tanya.
It's okay.
So much empathy as she grew through it, right? And we saw her, really come to realize, I think, in the end. So let's talk about the lavender, and let's talk about some of the women: Sydney, Elizabeth, Agnes, Nona.
Well, the relationship between the lavender and Sydney is they're bound together, and so it's a motif, so it repeats itself. And it repeats itself at specific moments. And it's the moments where, because the meaning of lavender has a lot of meanings, but one of them is grace, and to have grace. And so every time you see Lavender, there's a moment I want us to have grace for Sydney and to realize what she's actually dealing with. So when you go through the book, note it. Every time that, except for when Charlie smells lavender, but in his case, he's also going, I want to have grace for Elizabeth to some degree, not wholly, but at least to some degree. And so it's a constant reminder to be a person with grace, to have grace amidst what people are going through that you may not realize. And she's 19 years old, so she's processing a lot. There was something someone brought up to me online that is also relative, and there's a moment because I forget these things, I write them in and I kind of forget about them. But when Sydney gets on the bus and she steals Fella's bus, or she tries to, the bus number is 303. Does anyone remember that? That's the bus number, and that number is about forgiveness. So if you ever look up the meaning of the meaning of 303, it's about forgiveness and finding peace, inner peace. And so it was like grace, 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 forgiveness. That was the whole thing with the lavender and its association with Sydney, because she was dealing with so much. And I just, the psyche, and if I'm repeating this stuff, just bear with me, because I know not everyone was with us in LA. But there were two moments of sort of psychic projection. Good. So, and there's, as you talked about Ethel, at that point in the book, Charlie has to drive through like a wasteland of blackness, and then he arrives to Ethel, and what she wants to do is help him. She wants to heal him, just to make sure he's fed. She wants to educate him and to send him on his way so that he can continue on being the person he's here to be. In my mind, that was a projection of his psyche, like his inner self. That was that hope that I'm talking about, that thing inside of just like, you can do it. Don't worry, you can do it. I know you're going through a lot, but you can do it. And to achieve that, he had to get into the blackness. He had to get into himself. Mm-hmm. When he meets Sydney and then they leave, the first person that they encounter is Little, and they arrive into Kenosha, and it's spray painted white. It's like a chaos of whiteness. And then Little is wearing this KKK uniform and then grabs Sydney, and he keeps saying, you're one of us, you're one of us. He doesn't want to let her go. And that's her psyche and whiteness holding on to her, at least the concept of it, gripping her and not releasing her. And so we needed to be able to understand that that's what she was dealing with in her mind, both that she was Little and that Little was holding on to her. All those things.
Wow.
It's tough to unravel. Very, very tough to unravel. And so
did y'all pick up on that? Like,
I did not. I need to reread that section now.
Yeah.
That is wild. I just thought Lil was crazy, and there is still some lingering, folks that couldn't get on board yet. Like that is wild. That is wild.
That's her mental state. That's her mental
From
state.
Dakasha, because I think people wanted to know this. Hey, Dakasha. So do you think at the end, where is Sydney? Like, you've left us with that tidbit where she's sort of reckoning that her mother had more accountability than than we originally thought. There was parts in the book where she's like, my mother would never. She is so nice, right? But we realized her mother wasn't thought. What happens to Sydney? Like, we don't see her and Charlie reunited. Just tell us what happens at the end, because a lot of us were like, wait, what?
Yes, and still confused.
The simple is that she's lying on her back in that ocean. And remember, she's been afraid of the water all the way up until this time. And she wades out into the water, she floats, and she looks up at the same stars that Charlie looked at when he realized how to fix this thing. And she hears the signal as Charlie turns it on. And so she's connected to him over space and time in the same way. She's a part of that Black enormity, that thing that connects all of us. She's now finally a part of it. And in my mind, the water was sort of representative of it. I know all the white people drown in the water, but the water binds the whole globe. Like you can't go anywhere without crossing some water at some point. And so the water is us. And if you remember the scene, it's a parallel to the beginning of the book, both for Charlie and Sydney. So the beginning of the book, Charlie he arrives at school. He's very, very, very unsure of himself. Doesn't feel like he has any value, but he's in this classroom trying to teach these kids something. He doesn't feel deserving to be the person to teach them. At the end of the book, he is now about to teach the whole world something by turning on this machine, and he finally feels like he can. He feels like he can give that knowledge to people, and he's deserving of being the person that is sitting at the helm of that machine. At the beginning, at the end of Sydney's first scene, her parents walk into the ocean or into the lake, and she ends up floating in the water, wishing she could drown herself with them, utterly alone, staring at an empty sky. And the sky's just clouds, it's totally empty. And she says she couldn't hear anything. She couldn't hear what they heard. At the end of the book, she's lying flat on her back in the ocean, same way she was in the lake, and she describes it being black sea, black sky, and she's floating in an infinity. And to me, that was black. That's blackness. That's all of us. That's all the enormity that we are. And she's floating in that, and she isn't afraid of the water anymore. And she lets the letter go and lets it drift away because she's sort of freed of that desire, freed of that want. And then she hears it. The thing she couldn't hear when her parents walked into the ocean, she could hear it, but it was connected to Charlie. And so originally they were switched. Those scenes were switched, and my editor switched them. So they originally Charlie hit the machine, and then Sydney heard the signal, and it ended with Sydney, but she switched it, which I think is fine. So
okay, y'all, we needed that. I feel like we really needed that. And you guys, again, unmic, you can comment, tell me, everyone's so well behaved today. I love it.
Seriously, this is great.
You're always a good.
One of these questions, though, is super interesting that Jacqueline dropped in, and it's similar to a question I had for you too, Cebo. Like, you've been touring, talking about this book a lot. Has anyone offered an interpretation that you haven't or hadn't yet considered that's really kind of evolved your thinking along the way?
There's so many things, honestly. Like, people say stuff all the time to me, and it's usually a sort of a reaction to the book relative to their lives that I was like, I didn't think of that. I didn't know. I wasn't considering that. And people extract things from the book that I wasn't thinking when I was writing it. And I'm trying to think of some for you. But I hear all the time people come up to me and they'll go, they will talk about the signal a lot. And so I get so many people are like, okay, I understand what you were doing with the machine. I understand what you're doing with the obelisk, but let's talk about Tesla. And they'll just go in. And I was like, I didn't know this. I didn't know that. And then I get a lot about the Igbo. Well, one thing that's been getting a lot to me is the, what is it called? It's the Lake Rainier. I don't know anything about it. And everyone keeps saying it's like Lake Rainier. It's the same thing. And I'm like,
oh,
that's so funny.
Like, I haven't done any research on it yet, so I don't know what that means. So I've gotten that quite a lot, and then I've gotten just the conversation around like how people identify has been interesting, because that has been the book has sort of conjured those conversations. Think about every white person I hope there's white people on the call because I want them to hear this as well. Like, they never have to contemplate what it means to be white. They just go, I'm white. Like, that's it. We're just, I'm cooking, whatever, I'm here. And all of a sudden now with this book, people come to me and they'll be like, hey, I'm Italian, I'm not white. Or I'm this and I'm not white. And I'm like, have you ever said that in your entire life? You never said that in your entire life. I know you haven't. That's interesting, is that, it's sort of reversed the conversation in a way.
Yeah, they want to survive in the world that you created. Yeah. They're like, wait, I've got to find a way to still exist in this world.
Yeah.
Shar, I want to tap you in because I see your hand up, and then Aaron, we can bring you in too.
Hi, everyone. Hi, book besties. First of all, let me say, I love this book. I have to admit to my book besties that I read this book as soon as Tanya announced it. I read it in 2 or 3 days. It took me a weekend, and I had read the book before the book club. And so I will admit that I absolutely loved it. But what I had to ask you was, like, were there moments when you were writing this book that surprised you? Because I felt like I was on a journey of constant surprises. I didn't know where we were going and what was happening. And like, did the story take a life of its own? And like, because you said you wanted to be a romance, right? Like how many avenues did you go down?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this unexpected turn of events is happening for you in the writing process? If you can answer that.
Shar, thank you for your question, by the way. Thank you for reading the book that fast. I don't read anything that fast. I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'll close books and I come back to it in like a week. Like it's a struggle. But there's so much stuff that was just, I didn't see coming. So some of the process of writing any book that I write, but this one in particular, is I will make a sandbox for myself. So I will take and I'll write one sentence for every chapter until I get to the end. And so I know what the end looks like. And then I'll fill that sort of box in with stuff. And I'll have like anecdotes, little sayings that I know will resonate. I'll have like little historical things. I don't know where they are in the sequence of it, but I'll just pile it all into the sandbox. And then I'll start writing. And once I start writing, it's like I'm driving down the street with the headlights on. And for the most part, I'm like, I know where I'm going. I'm cruising along. And then sometimes something will jump in front of me and I'm like, oh, what was that? That the whole machine, the whole thing was that.
Wow.
So there was no machine. There was no machine.
Okay, because I was just like, wait, where did this come from? And then, I was just kind of like on this journey with you, like, did he know he was going to do that? And even
I did not.
Because as a Caribbean American woman, I was even wondering, like, when Charlie was lost, and then all of a sudden he goes to Alabama where there's culture, Caribbean culture, like, was there also supposed to be significance in that? Because there's lots of conversations that I have a lot with a lot of my friends from different cultures where we talk about, and it has been said where, I've lived in other parts of the world where they've said, like, Americans, we've lost ourselves. Was there some significance in using the cultural themes to define like Blackness?
100%. In part because I think I hope I don't offend anybody when I'm gonna say this. So I'm prefacing any offense. I think we have lost it. I think we have diluted it because we've sold it and we don't realize we've sold it. I mean, you think of you go back to, for example, 1988 and you listen to some rap albums. You go to 1990, listen to rap albums, and now listen to some. Go back to 1990, listen to R&B, and now listen to some. They're trying to find that thing that was already happening back then. And that's only 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You go back 100 years, there's a bunch of stuff. You go back 500 years, there's a bunch of stuff. There's a whole technology, there's a whole way of existing that we have disconnected from. And so I had a conversation with this gentleman from Burkina Faso in Central West Africa. And he was telling me about how their villages operate with their economy and their education as a synergy. And the way he said it really simply, he was like, when you turn 13 years old, you spend your teenage years identifying a problem with our village, a problem with our community. And then you go to college, you leave the village, you go off and you figure out a solution to that problem, the problem that you identify, you specifically. And when you arrive back, you're heralded, everyone's so happy that you're back, celebration, and then the solution becomes your business that you now operate. And I was like, well, that feels really simple. I don't know why we're not doing that. It's stuff like that. I mean, and I find myself living in it both from the perspective of how a civilization operates to how we think of our spiritual connection to God. I go, our ancestors didn't operate on 5 senses. They operated on a lot more senses than that. And so was their reality bigger than ours, or do we only know reality by what we can touch? And I don't think so, because if my mom comes to me, and you've heard me say this, she calls me and she goes, I have a dream about you. That's her intuition talking. And she believes it and I believe it. And I'm like, all right, I need to watch what I'm doing today. That's because she's tapping into something much older that we don't have a language for. It's not registered in our reality day to day. And so I wanted to excavate some of that. I want to dig it up and like put it in front of us and go, yo, we aren't doing this. And a really simple example is that solar panel, the solar power that they use throughout Mobile. He said it's a paint. You can coat everything with it, and then everything is charged. I didn't make that up. That was some theologians from Egypt that said that's what they were doing in Egypt. And I was like, I never heard that. That sounds hotepi to me. Is that real? And they were like, yeah, that's what we were doing. That's what it was, is you could transfer the power of the sun and you can use it to operate things throughout the day. And I was like, we have electrical vehicles right now that are sitting outside and they don't have solar panels on them. That is a decision. That isn't because it's how our society operates. It's because they're trying to make money off of you. And they've tried to make money off Blackness since the beginning. And so I'm like, that's what's happened, is the desire to figure out a way to capitalize on what Blackness is, either via our bodies, via our creativity, via our output, via our charm, via our influence, has watered down the thing that we all hold dear. And that's why you've heard me say this, Tanya, you've heard me say it as well, Janelle. I think we are not a monolith, but we need to be thinking monolithically, which is to say, identify our values, identify your value system, identify your principles, identify the things that make us who we are, and then put a fence around it and protect it. Because it's very clear to me in this election, they certainly are a monolith in opposition of you, particularly black women. If 92% of Black women voted one way, and the rest of the country was like, nah, that means they see you, and they're like, we are in opposition of that. And so we need to see it as well. And so that was very, very much intentional, for sure.
Also, shout out to the 92. Like, y'all, that really proud of that 92, right? I'm sure there's a lot of us in this space right now, which is it's powerful. Cebo, I know we want to bring Erin in for her question. Another one as we're like making that transition. Something that struck me, especially in Orange Beach, was this idea of religion. Like I was thinking a lot throughout this book, like, where is God? Like faith, how does that start to show up? And, you know, in Orange Beach, we effectively have this church that Agnes is real involved in, but it's doing the opposite of what so many Black communities look to a church to do in this story. Was that intentional? Your use of a church a church type of structure within Orange Beach?
Yes, very much, very much. I mean, this is all from study. Like, from the continent, they didn't have buildings to determine a housing place for spirit, and spirit wasn't limited to God and only God. And I want to articulate it in a different way. So imagine, you don't have to, but imagine that God is the universe, right? All things in the universe. But all it takes is a meteor, a comet astray to kill everything on this planet, right? That means that there's a lot of stuff in between us and God. That doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. That means there's a lot of stuff in between. And our ancestors believe that too. And so they can communicate with their ancestors. They can communicate with higher spirits. They can work their way up to God. And I think what we've arrived to is this place that you have to walk in this door, you have to say these words, you have to talk to this person in particular, and that's the only access point you have to God. And I'm like, I think that there's more. And I think that, me personally, but our ancestors believe that as well. So I wanted to fold that in and to create a sort of juxtaposition between what they were doing in Orange Beach. And you're in Orange Beach and you're just vibing, like it's good.
Yeah.
Right?
You're having your Starbucks, your Coke.
Her name? How do I say it?
Seraphine, that's it. It could be Seraphim or Seraphine, but she's an angel as well. That's a whole thing. She's she represents an angel that can give you rebirth, give you change, give you evolution, and she does that with Charlie. And so the name for her was important. But yeah, the idea that she could be a conjure woman, and the conjure women, it's really simple. We love Black Panther, right? We love that movie. Everyone loves that movie. It's brilliant. His only superpower is that he could talk to his ancestors. Everything else is like given to him by like vibranium or via the suit. But he can communicate. He can go to the ancestral plane and talk to his ancestors and get advice. That was the most powerful thing that he could do. And I thought, well, I think we can still do that. I think we can still sit and talk to our people if we need to. We do it. I think we do it more often than we realize, because we make decisions against all hope, and that feels like counterintuitive to like a natural way of being. If everything in your life said you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, and you still go, I can. I think that's an ancestral conversation you're having, whether you realize it or not. And so I wanted that to fold into the book. I wanted spirituality to be a conversation because I think it's a bigger conversation than what we feel comfortable having, in the same way that whiteness is a bigger conversation than we feel comfortable having. And I want to have both of them.
Ooh.
I'm going to give us a 13-minute warning, because we're really going to try and keep you as close. So you guys, if you
all good. I
want to make sure we hit the key stuff. But Erin, I know you had another question. And tomorrow I saw you dropped a question about grace in here that we'll come back to that.
Someone did just say something about the ancestors help with the seasoning when they're cooking, and I'm for that.
Channeling them this week as I attempt a non-Thanksgiving, because I don't claim Thanksgiving meal. But yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Should we bring Erin down to the?
You have a question?
Yeah, I think Erin had her hand up.
I do. So it's two things. The first thing is when you brought up how we were the 92% and how those other individuals voted as a block for the Tangerine Tyrant, it reminds me of page 111, and it's Charlie and Sailor and Sydney in the car. And the conversation goes, you know where I'm going with this, don't you? Never feeling shame for that and not allowing us to feel anger over it means we don't evolve. We just go on repeating evil. We can't understand. I'm sure your mama was a nice lady with a good heart, but her not feeling ashamed about all that happened is the same as not feeling anything at all. Now, for context, I read this just a few days after the election. That summed up everything for me as a person, because you can't make sense of what doesn't make sense. So we just gonna leave those people where they are. But this is my question. Why did you choose to sum up Sydney's mother's letter as opposed to actually writing the letter for us to read?
You know what's so crazy about this is I wrote the letter, and I showed it to my wife, and she said this, and it's funny because it lives in some of the Goodreads stuff, which I don't agree with. She goes, if you put that letter in there, you're centering her, and you don't want to center her. And I thought, okay,
oh, wifey,
done. Say no more. And I put it out, but I have written it. I didn't. She's like, you're giving her a voice. You shouldn't give her a voice in this book.
Oh,
I was like, all right,
wow.
Say no more. Say no more. So I like, and I hear people say, like, I heard a couple of comments. People are like, well, he still made the book about a white woman. I was like, I don't like. We have to be able to, like, if you're triangulating anything, you have 3 points of reference. You have a point of like, look where you are, where you're going, and a point of like reference for height and width. And I'm like, we have to have a point of reference for her, and that is to say, someone who is willing to completely trade in this man's life as if it has no value, which is the prerequisite to him believing he doesn't have value. We have to have that point of reference. Otherwise, we don't fully understand what he's dealing with as an individual character. But I didn't want her to have a voice. I didn't want her to speak. You know, the only person that speaks.
I want to say this. For those who believe that you still centered her are the same people who are fussing about whether Kendrick's latest drop is actually good or not. They don't get it. They are out of touch. What you did was show how this woman, you highlighted her sin and how she was complicit in her brother's sin. That's what you did. You didn't highlight this old raggedy woman.
That's it. And that's exactly why her letter didn't make it. I couldn't have it.
Yes, that makes sense.
I couldn't have her speaking.
That's what I said. I will say this. Nothing she could have said that would have made it okay. So I'm like, I'm glad that you omitted the letter.
Yeah.
No. There's nothing that she could say. You're right. Nothing she could say to make any of this okay, because it's already passed. And that is, in my mind, a sort of microcosm to the experience of being Black in America. It's already happened. So there ain't nothing you can say that's going to fix it. Just move out of the way. Like, just stop talking. Just move out of the way. Because you've done enough damage, and that damage can't be undone. There's no process by which it can be undone. And I experienced this, Aaron, when I was in Berlin, and they have a monument. It's called the Monument for the Murdered Jews. And it's enormous. It's like 2 blocks, and it's this beautiful monument that you walk through, and it's these blocks that go like they change in height, so it feels like you're moving up and down. It's an astonishing piece of work, and they are intent to honor the Jews who were killed in the Holocaust. All their houses that they were pulled out of, there's plaques outside of them to tell you who lived in that house. because they never want to repeat it. They teach it in school because they never want to repeat it. And I'm sitting here going, like, okay, all right, 6 million Jews died. 20 million people died in the Congo, and we don't even know about it. All the people that were transferred to this continent and have been pillaged for 400 years, 400 plus years, 500 plus, if you consider what was happening in South America. Like, no one talks about it. There's still statues for Confederate soldiers, right? Like, and so if you can't feel shame for that, you can't properly honor that, right? How you're just going to repeat it, which is what Elizabeth does. She just repeats the same thing.
But think about it this way. You're talking about how in Berlin, they take the time to honor those Jews who were slaughtered. And here in America, we use plantations as wedding venues. Nobody thinks about the number of spirits that are on that land. No one thinks about what happened to the people that look like us on that land. How many bodies are still on that land? But oh no, we're going to go and throw the rice and eat the cake.
And protect the statues.
Truly.
Aaron, I have a great tie-in to this.
Go ahead.
Because you've said this to us. And someone asked about the significance of the title and the water. And last week when we were with you, we had the extreme pleasure of being right on the water. So imagine having this conversation, you guys, and you just heard waves. Like, it was chilling. Talk a little bit about why water. You've shared this with me before, and why that was sort of significant for you in many parts of this book.
So I needed to have an erasure first, and I knew that I needed to sort of have something that cleared out white people, and we didn't have to go back. It just happened. It was done. And there was no better scenario for me initially than the water. And I knew that, like, one, the tide always comes back. So all the stuff you've done is eventually going to come back. And that was a sort of visual representation of that. And obviously our ancestors were in the water during the Middle Passage. And so first that was how it was. And I was like, okay, that works. All the white people walk into the ocean, they disappear. And we have sort of a clear reality, clear slate to operate on. But then I ran into another sort of tactical issue about how the bodies would float. And someone brought this up to me in an early reading. They were like, if bodies are in the water, they literally float. So why aren't the bodies filled with, why aren't the bodies of water filled with floating bodies? And it was instant. My mind was like, oh, because our ancestors were in that water and they held them in place for us. They gave us back this land. They gave us back our lives because they've been waiting on this moment, and they held them underwater for us. And so they couldn't come back up. And there's a scene where Sydney's parents walk under and she's trying to pull them up, and it says to pull them up, it says something along the lines of, to pull them up, we have to pull the whole earth with it. We have to pull the whole earth with it. And that was our ancestors. It's how heavy that is. And so that heaviness was relative to the title as well, because of the elephants, because of just the image of that comes in our mind, that conjures in our mind when we think of an elephant. We think of the continent. We think of that heaviness. We think of that memory that is associated with elephants moving through the world, that they can follow the same track lines over generations, that they retain that. And I wanted that because the idea of that signal, which you asked earlier, I didn't fully answer, Tanya, the signal that hits these people, both the white people and everyone, is all of that memory, all of that emotion, and all of that knowledge all at once. And so some people get hit with the emotion and you walk into the ocean, but some people get hit with the knowledge and they realize who they are. They can orient to a sense of self because they can see from beginning to end. And that is based on me seeing the horizon for the first time, which I told you this story as well. When I was a kid, we lived on a beach, but our parents would not let us go to the beach. None of us, and my mom's kids, my mom's sister's kids, none of them could go to the beach. And so we just hung out at the house, spraying each other with a water hose. And one day we decided to sneak down to the water, and it was so, like, I think about it now and I picture it in my head. I can see it so clearly, walking past Martin Luther King Boulevard, crossing over, and then entering these beautiful winding streets with the lanterns and the live oak trees.
Florida, right? Is that where you're from? Panama?
It's Florida, Panama City, Florida. And then coming down the hill as it began to crest, and literally seeing the ocean for the first time in my life, and having never looked as far as my eyes could see ever. because there's always something, an obstruction of our view. But in ocean, there is nothing. You can look all the way until the world starts to, the curvature of the world hits. And I've never seen it before. I've never experienced it. And I was young. I was like 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. And I still remember how profound that was for me. And I remember the people who lived there and all the big houses who had the oceanfront views called police on us because they said, you can't be down here. And so I wanted all of that to live within the context of how the water affected white people, because it's affected us in so many ways. When I had my talk with Jason Reynolds, one of the questions he had for me was, he said the water has been our sort of a place where we go to heal. It's a place that we go to commune, but you made it into a graveyard. And I said, no, I didn't. I didn't. If you really think of it, it was our retribution. And it's not a graveyard. It's not a graveyard at all. It's been waiting all that time for us to get our retribution, and it's giving it to us. And so we go to honor it just like we go to honor it now.
Ooh, Tanya, he's bringing back flashbacks for me of being in Ghana. You know, we had a moment standing in the slave river, the last place where slaves had a bath before, you know, crossing the ocean. And it was this surreal moment that almost it just felt ethereal almost. It didn't actually feel sad, but there was just so much life that was exuding in the water. So you brought that memory back so vividly. Alicia, I see your hand up there, and I know Tamara had an interesting question too, that while we bring Alicia up, we'll plant this with you, Cebo. Curious how people have responded, right? And what has the reaction been to you, you know, in writing this book? Looking at some of the comments, this book is racist, which I have issues with the use of that word in that context. But I'm curious, you know, how you have navigated some of those responses, and has it had an impact on you in any capacity?
No, I get more people who come to me and they are, one, they feel reinvigorated by this book. They feel like it is giving them a balm for, particularly post-election, where you need to be reminded that you are important in this country and that you are of great value and you contribute something that is so significant that the country both extracts from it and hides the fact that they're extracting it, right? And so I've gotten more love than my little body can hold. Like it's, and the anger that I get, the vitriol, I've been getting all my life. So it's like, that is like, okay, you did this before the book came out, so it's fine. Right. What has been interesting is I was talking to my friend Philip, who wrote the book Ours, which I think his book and my book are cousins. And he was like, how is it that I see your book everywhere? And he goes, I talk to people and they all read it and they talk about it. He said, but I've never seen it in New York Times. I've never seen it in NPR. I've never seen it in any public, in any
Morning
of those.
America.
Right. None of it. And he's like, I see all these lists. They'll come out and they'll be like, the best books of 2024. He goes, I never see it in them.
Yeah.
And I go, I think that is an element of writing this book that has been interesting, but it hasn't deterred me in any way. It's like, oh no, I know who's reading this book because it's the people who I wrote it for. So I'm not so interested in it going to get the approval of a bunch of people in New York Times when I sit on a call with all of you lovely people and you go, this was helpful to me, this was useful to me, right? That to me, there's no greater thing that I can do, in part because when I was writing this book, I had a vision in my mind. I think I may have told you both this. I was sitting there and I was starting to write it, and I had this just crystallized image of Toni Morrison going, "Don't you hold back, don't you hold back," and it kept coming back to me. It kept coming back, and I would be writing, and she'd go, "Don't hold back," and I would cross that line out, write a different one, and so I trusted that, like, and that's the ancestral thing I'm talking about. I'm writing it, and I don't know who's going to publish it when I'm writing it. I'm just going, all right, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to write exactly what you tell me. We're going to go all the way. And they're going to be dead, and there's not going to be, like, I had people come to me and go, well, what about Jewish people? Will they still be alive? And I'm like, nope, all y'all dead. Everybody's dead. And so, like, I just trusted it. And I think
with it.
that is the prerequisite to faith, is trusting something that is bigger and broader than you are, that extends out far beyond you, and just go, all right, I hear you, I'm listening, I hear you, I'm gonna rock with it. And that to me is its own success. So I don't really, the stuff I hear is not.
Tanya, can I say something? So I asked
Dr. Signal.
Wait, say that again, Rach.
I said that we're glad he got the signal.
Yeah, we glad you
Yes.
But I feel like I miss the messages sometimes. So I'm glad that you found its purpose and we were able to enjoy this book.
Absolutely.
And trust yourselves. Yeah, I agree.
mean, something we talk about a lot too is really questioning these measures of success, right? So especially when it comes to our work, our artistry, all of these measures for success that we're created and curated are forms of supremacy on the arts, whether it's, the Oscars, yes, shout out to my old employer, or literally these bestsellers lists. And I do think even that statement of you acknowledging this wasn't for that is a powerful one in understanding how we liberate ourselves from these systems that you describe so vividly in your books. And at the same time, some of those systems still exist in our books. So what's really needed for us to truly break free? And that's what this book has really prompted for me. I know Alicia and Sylvester, we see hands. Cebo, can we steal you for a few more minutes? I know.
No, I got you. Don't worry.
Yeah, Alicia and Sylvester, I love it.
Yeah, and my question is quick, and it actually kind of, hopefully it's in the same vein. So I was gonna DM you because I got into this heated discussion with some of my book influencers, and also Rashawn kind of touches on it in the chat. So when I read the book, of course, it was set in the U.S. and America, so that was my focus. But of course, I commune with some very heavy readers and some deep readers, and they're like, no, this happened globally. And there was this whole conversation about, people leaving Africa and reclaiming all of these empty countries and things like that. And so what was your thoughts on that? And maybe hopefully that'll be a prelude to another book. But was you thinking that this was, I guess I thought it was staying in America because of the specific, travesty and chattel slavery, which of course I know happened across the globe. But did you think that was this a global event? Because then we got into this discussion of well, now the people from Europe are coming over and gonna attack all the things. So I don't know.
I also thought, to your point, if Charlie got the machine working as it should, that the possibility would be that the signal would be so strong.
Stronger. That's what
Yeah.
Yes. So did you even go that far with, or are we just going too far with our imaginations?
No. I was living in it, man. I was living in it. And thank you, Alicia. Of course. I'm so glad when you're on. Okay. So one, America specifically had a very, very unique take on chattel slavery. It was brutal in a way that history has no record, no point of reference for. It was astonishingly brutal. The way that they treated people, the way that they operated, the way that they created systems, not just of social oppression, but literally scientific oppression. They were going, no, you're not even the same type of human being. That's insane. And so the American particular has never once tried to show any shame or cognizance of it. And so I was like, if there's a buildup of that, it's happening here. It's probably happened in South America too, similarly. But I was like, this one is if the sky falls on this place, it's going to be bad, right? Very bad. But when I was imagining the other parts of the world, I was like, well, if they hear about this, they're not crossing that water. Nobody's getting in no boats. Nobody's getting in any planes. They're not crossing that water anytime soon. So the idea of colonization via, any sort of transatlantic, that ain't happening. So they're not doing that. But when Charlie turns the machine on that last time, he's calibrated it to only affect Black people. And so he's calibrated it in such a way that when it hits you, you go, wait a minute, what am I doing? What is going on in my reality? It isn't wiping out white people, right? But white people don't know that. And so when I imagine a book 2, it's them going, well, what happens if they do that? if they have a weapon that can kill us. And I really want you all to wrap your head around that, because we knew they had a weapon to kill us, right? And we go, they have a weapon that can enslave us, but we're leaning on their better judgment. And they didn't do it. They still enslaved us. If given the same opportunity and they knew that we had a weapon that could do that to them, would we lean on our better judgment? And I think we would. I think we wouldn't be I don't think we're the type of people that's like, we are from a place of great indulgence, and we've always had everything we needed. The abundance has been a part of our reality. That continent had everything you could possibly need: all the food, all the animals, all the water, all access to knowledge. You had so much space and time in terms of overcoming a need for survival, that you had the room to stare up at the stars and create a mathematical language. You had the room to build out architecture and art. You had room to do that. Whereas in the North, if you go a little bit further where things are getting icy up in Sweden and further north than that, they didn't. They had the opposite. They had no abundance. They had scarcity. And so they had to learn to hoard everything they possibly could for fear of not surviving. So they arrived to a place of great abundance, and they just go, I'm going to take all of that. I don't think a place of abundance is going to look at them and go, I'm going to take everything you got. They're just not. And so I think that's the spirit of who we are. But that is a book too. That's the next book conversation.
Is that Nona a little bit? Because I think it was so interesting how Nona, Vivian was like, and this kind of brings in my sister's question, and I promise you, Sylvester, I'll zip it after this. You're next. Vivian was kind of like risk versus worth. Vivian was like all ready to just put the machine on max and kill everybody, right? Because, right? But it was Nona who kind of was like, that's not the world I want to live in.
And empowered Charlie. No, literally, she was the one who gave him the keys and put that ethical kind of decision in his hands.
I've always imagined Nona. So it's interesting when you interact with the next generation, right? It's almost as if they're operating with the same knowledge base, and where like Malcolm X is like, no, we got to defend ourselves at all costs. We're not having that, not doing any of that. You have Warnock, who might be a little lighter on that principle, right? And so the older we get, or the younger we get, I should say, the less we feel the rage, I guess. Even if it's deserving, we feel less of it. There was that singer, I'm trying to remember his name. He like heard someone talking trash about this white singer, and he defended her because she said the N-word, and he defended her. He goes, you guys need to get over that. It's that mentality that I first was like, well, I want the young people to have that mentality. But I was like, that can't be Nona. Nona doesn't have that mentality. But what she does have is the mentality of abundance. She's not worried about failure, because there's nothing in the world that can stop her from achieving what she wants. And so it became like if you were to take that softness, but apply to it a total confidence, a total certainty that like whatever I want to do, I'm going to be able to do. I'm going to be the queen, right? Like that mentality. And so she wasn't worried about like Sydney for sure. She was like, come on, you'll figure it out eventually. I don't have to force you. You will figure it out because I've got it. I've got everything you could possibly need. And there was a scene when Sydney arrived to Nona's bedroom. Nona wasn't even in the room, and Sydney recognized that fact, that Nona had friends, family, connection to culture, connection to creativity, connection to ancestors, that she didn't have any of it. And she wasn't even in the room, and you can identify that energy. And so I kind of wanted that, like the counterbalance of the two of them, one operating out of a sense of scarcity and one working out of a sense of abundance.
Sylvester, you're up. Can you hear us?
We've been waiting.
I'm waiting. I was headed to dinner on a quick, like, friends headed to Palestine, like, in a week.
Wow.
Like, yo, I'll meet you for dinner right now. So I'm sitting on the side of the restaurant. But yo, congratulations on all the success, every bit of it. Thank you for chiming in on your signal from London, bro.
Appreciate you, man.
Hit me hard when I was reading. Thank you so much for putting some more education with Haiti, because Haiti was that original resistance. Like, nah, we ain't giving up. We finna take everything back right now. And something that I didn't know if you were alluding to, but I learned from Kelly Carter Jackson. She did a book called We Refuse, and in it that Haiti, if anybody black got free and got to Haiti,
yes,
a Haitian resident, like what she was at. I mean, citizen.
You get citizenship. Yeah.
And if it helped to get free, they got money and weapons and gave them to you to go back and fight if you needed it. So they were like, look, everybody can come here. We got space for everybody. And I thought about that when King was talking to Charlie and was like, look, you got here. We putting the circumference around everything, and we finna put out the signal to change things up a little bit, which we found out about later in the book. But it also gave Charlie a chance to get that knowledge of self of something he had done as a child. Bruh, I was writing so many books down right then to like let little black boys tinker and imagine and do everything, because that's how engineers develop. That's how mechanics develop. Like, that's how we can build our cities. Let kids play with stuff. And to show, you just touched on it a second ago, that even if we had, and they did get the power to wipe out every enemy we have, coming from a place of abundance and then seeing how it felt when it happened to us, we were like, nah, we don't want that to happen to you. So we're going to give you a chance. And it made me think, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Sphere. Queen Latifah was in it. It's an old sci-fi. But you had the power to do whatever you wanted to do with your mind. Anything. And they sat after a while and said, why can't we make the world better? Like, if we have all of this power, and Agent Orange is in office right now, all of his Cheeto friends and everything, and they're putting themselves, just stacking the deck to take over, when they could just as easily say, we got enough money to feed everybody, to make sure all crime is going, to make sure everything's taken care of, and they ain't doing it. So, yo, man, I'm ready for the second book.
Let me speak to that a little bit, Sylvester, because what they're doing is they're maintaining their survival, which is still operating out of a sense of scarcity. They are afraid, they're in a constant state of fear, and so they're doing everything they can to hoard and hold on to everything they possibly can. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what you said about Haiti, because that's true. Haiti, and that they had planned to make that space a place of convergence for anyone that was brought over from the continent, anyone that was on the Antilles, the islands, that they can come there, get citizenship, get knowledge of self, get sort of realigned with their culture. And when they did that, they were the last vestige of the transatlantic slave trade into South America and up into North America. So they would arrive into South America, and you can go to South America now, and you'll find people who worship, the Orishas today, right? And you get into the Haiti, and they still do. But by the time you get to America, it's like that's cut off completely. And that cutoff happened when that went down. When they were like, no, Haiti is about to if Black Americans, you come here, you'll get citizenship, you'll be able to start your businesses, you can build houses, you can build condos. We're ready for you. The American government did everything it could have shut that down and created an embargo, so we couldn't do anything with Haiti on purpose, because you could not have that. If you've ever been to Haiti, that beach, there's no better beach, right? Like if you talk about beachfront property, there's no better beach, and they have everything they need to operate. And you go, okay, if we could go back to that island and build our homes, build our families, and have a sort of, if you think of it like in a beachfront house that you go to in the summer, that it was in Haiti. And that's also where you recommune with a sense of community and a connection back to the original continent. That would be transformative for a lot of Black people. Don't even get to travel at all. And the idea that you go get your passport and you can go to Haiti and be stamped as a citizen is pretty remarkable. But when that went down, I want to say it was in the 60s or something like that, when they sent that decree out, that was immediately squashed by the American government. I read about this and I was like, man, that would have been great. Like that would have been pretty
He
great.
had no idea. Thank you all both, Cebo, Sylvester, for dropping that gem here. Like again, you've ignited my desire to like research Haitian history is like it deep in the algorithm right
Deep,
now. It's crazy.
deep. That's
Okay,
great.
we're
I
gonna
love it.
let you, for the most part, go. If there's any rapid questions that you guys want, I know you've sort of given us a little teaser. You are working on some more things. Can you tell us anything else that we really missed? If anyone has any great things, pop them in the chat right now.
Hit me with any last questions, and I will sort of give you a sentiment. I think I've not said this on any talk, and it's important to say it here with you all. When you leave here, I want you to think of Toni Morrison when she says, "Make yourself the center," and she goes, "Wherever you are, that is the center." And the question is, how do you make wherever you are the center? How do you actually do that? And it sounds good. Like when she says it, I'm like, yeah, I make myself center, but how do you do it? And what I've learned, not exclusively with this book, just in my life in general, but as a result of this book, is there's a phrase that repeats in my mind. It says, act with magnetism. Act with magnetism, which means focus on yourself, focus on what you're doing, focus on your community, focus on what they're doing, and what will happen. And you can look back through history, it's always happened. It creates a gravitational force, and everyone wants to be near you. The things that you want are drawn to you, and that is centering. It's literally centering. That magnetism becomes centering. And you can see it if someone goes, I want to make an album. Kendrick Lamar makes that album. He's not worried about anybody else. He's focused on making this album. When it hits, everybody's trying to capitalize on it. Everyone wants to listen to it. Everyone wants to sell it. Everyone wants to do, because he's magnetized in output. Identify the things that are valuable to you and meaningful to you as a person. Identify the things that you want to put out in the world and the things you want to take in, and focus on that alone. Don't worry about all the other stuff. And it creates a magnetism to draw to you all the things that you want. And it makes you the center of the world that you want to live in.
Okay, that is the word that I needed going into this thing. That was so beautiful. Cebo, thank you so much. I'm going to drop a little thing that Cebo once said, because people always asked us this, in addition to understanding that we need to shine our signals as bright and just follow all of the intuitions and tap into our sister circles, our ancestral circles, all of this. But this is going to take us to a light place. We always ask this, who, if, and when I will say this goes to screen, who is Charlie and who is your Sydney?
It's so funny because the song you're playing right now is a trip. It's well done. Well done. When I draw when I do that sandbox I was describing, I will put photos in for all of the characters. So there's actual like images of them. And always Charlie was Andre 3000. And I don't know why he was. Like when you think of Three Stacks, you don't automatically go scientist, but he's got that like, with his gray hair now, and he's got his little goofy glasses on, and you know that if that man walks in the room, he can kind of do anything he wants. It doesn't matter what he does.
But you know what? He just radiates an eternalness, right? Charlie would need, and the wisdom. That is perfect. And you had said that the other day. I just wanted to make sure that you guys.
Wait, but who's Sydney? Who's your Sydney?
I'm trying to remember her name. Kiersey Clemens, who I had. So if you don't know who she is, she's a great actress. But crazy enough, I didn't know this about Kiersey. I just took a picture of her and I was like, I'm gonna drop well, you could drop it in chat, but she's great actor. But I didn't know anything about her. I just seen her on some stuff. And my mother lives in Pensacola, Florida, which is very near to Orange Beach. Kiersey Clemens is from Pensacola, Florida. And I had no idea. I just took a picture and put it in. But she was always Sydney. And she's biracial, but she, you could tell, like if she walked into a room, you'd be like, oh, she Black. Like there ain't no question about that. And I kind of wanted Sydney to be non-passing, but to like opposed to Agnes, who was passing. I wanted Sydney to be clearly like of the culture. And so I had
Great
her
shout.
photo in there.
She is also 30, so shout out to Black women never aging. I love this so much. She's incredible.
That's so funny. If
This
you ever
is
get a chance to watch her, she's great on screen. She's fabulous. Very, very good actor.
Cebo, this is seriously, every time we get to speak to you, it's like highlight of the day. I know it's so late for you there, so just like so much gratitude for you showing up, you know, for this community. We're obsessed with this book.
Before you leave, everyone is always on mics and just shouts our praises to you.
Yes.
Apps and just y'all.
Woo-hoo!
We're so happy. Like, unmic yourself, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Part two.
Yeah, we're waiting. We are waiting.
Novel.
I can't wait. I appreciate you.
I'm wholly unprepared to accept all of that gratitude. You can see I'm actually very. I will. May this not be the last time we have our.
We hope not.
Yes.
We love repeats. We love.
Good. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much. Get some sleep. Happy, well, it's not Thanksgiving there, but happy holidays. Keep us tuned. We are sending you and wishing you all the best luck. And for those of you who are staying on, it's the after party.
Y'all have fun.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Hi, you guys.